Hi, how are you, Anna?
6 o'clock right now.
Good.
So let's go ahead and call the meeting to order at 6 p.m. tonight. And
Would you like me to call roll call?
yes, please.
Bill Bengesa,
Yes.
Anna Aldera,
Here.
Richard Beneke,
Present.
Thomas Lemasters,
Here.
Steve Cooley,
Here.
Baron Janetti is absent. Councilmember Carroll,
Here.
Mayor Martinez.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum, so let's go ahead and move on there. It has been mentioned that Barry Giannetti would not be here tonight, has been excused. Any other absences or anything that we need to be aware of? Okay, so then let's move on to the pledge, and Mr. Lee Masters will lead us in that.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Any adjustments or changes to the agenda that's been published? No comments on that. And are there any conflict of interest disclosures that are necessary tonight? Okay. With that, moves us into the public comment period. Do we have speakers tonight?
Yes, sir. Speaker is Libby Ramovic.
Libby Aramovic. First week of June, your finance director, Milana Taylor, disappeared. She did not give a resignation notice, but she got a $50,000 payoff. I would file a fraud complaint with this organization, but we know this committee is fraud, right, Anna? Grand jury report came out, talks about fraud, deceit, conspiracy to deceive the people. Y'all proud of yourselves? Ask them about forging the audit. You're all on record. I will bring you the documents if you're interested. But what we found out is that people sit here and they see the documents and they go along with it anyway. Right, Anna? Right, Beneke? So you have no finance director. Milana Taylor was never qualified, right? Was she approved by council to be the finance director? No. Required by law, but that never happened. And now she's gone. Why is Milana Taylor gone? She just bought a new house a few weeks ago. She probably needed that money. But she was a fraud. She wasn't qualified for her job as finance director, and she forged the audits. They forged $400 million on the 2017 audit. And they brought in a light bulb salesman named Don McDougal to claim that he assessed the infrastructure. $400 million missing out of the city of Beaumont. No fire stations, no recycled water, adequate roadways, no regional parks. After the raids, the Parks and Rec Department asked for their money. $12 million, can you give us our money so we can build these regional parks? The city's answer was no, we're not paying you anything. We're not giving you any money. To this day, the city collects money for regional parks, but they refuse to turn it over to the Parks and Rec. That's what you got into. I didn't turn you in to the grand jury. I don't have to. It was the state and feds that forced that. To quote the Board of Accountancy, this is really serious. This is criminal. Yes, really serious, really criminal.
Other speakers?
Other public speakers?
No, sir.
Okay, let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the adoption and the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Anybody have any comments? If no comments, I'm looking for a motion and a second.
Moved.
A motion to approve minutes?
Second.
Okay, if there's no objections, we'll go ahead and approve those minutes and move on to the next item. And that item is the finance director's comments. There's somebody going to handle that.
Yes, sir.
You be Mr. Parton? Thank
Yes,
you.
sir. Yes, sir.
Who's your finance director?
So we have-
Excuse me,
I'm asking.
you're out of order. If you want to do it, please do it in the proper manner. Go ahead, Mr. Parton.
So we had presented to you in your packet a copy of our financials up to date through fiscal year 18-19 and 19-20. So we'll be discussing that here in a little bit with your next statement coming up. So we are in the process of finishing out end of year for 18-19. And our plan and schedule thus far is to have a draft audit document for the Finance and Audit Committee in January. And then, if all goes well, to have it ready for receipt and consideration by City Council coming up in their February meetings. So looks like we're on track and moving forward with that. So it really kind of concludes comments to the committee, unless you guys have some additional questions.
Any update on the finance director
Um,
recruitment process?
Yes, so we are looking to have a hire for City Council to consider at the next meeting coming up, next City Council meeting in a couple weeks.
Okay, very good. Okay. Any comments? Okay, let's move on to the next item, which are the financial reports for June 2019. And Mr. Parton will be presenting those as well.
Yes, sir. So the report you have shows 18-19 that we had. There are still some final closeouts for 18-19. For example, we've just received the final property tax allocation from the county, so that needs to be reflected in. So what you look at right now, the taxes as a negative actually will be finalized and confirmed. What you do see is a net change of minus 3.1 million. There's some final transfers in that need to happen on the general fund side. And so a large portion of that is the actual transfers of final CFD. So we have final accounting to do, determine the final amounts to transfer over from that. So ultimately, should be in a net positive position with regard to the general fund budget. Kind of same thing on the wastewater fund. We are finalizing end of year. So final payments for the year are really just coming in with the billings that are out today or came out this week. And then you can see we're in the very beginning of the 19-20 fiscal year. So at this point, there's nothing that really kind of jumps out as a concern.
Okay, so everything's about where we would expect it to be, and we don't have any big variances or anything that's jumping out. Any comments, anybody? Okay. I guess we're ready to move on to the next agenda item, which is the consideration of the City Council direction to the Finance and Audit Committee.
Mr. Chairman, real quick,
Yes.
do we need to move to receive and file?
Yes, we do.
So move.
We have a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we receive and file the preliminary financial reports that have been presented to us for June 2019 and July. Any comments before anybody opposed to receiving and filing those? Okay, so it passes and they'll be received and filed. So that moves us up to number 5, which is the consideration of City Council directions to the Finance and Audit Committee. And we have a staff report on that, and that staff report is prepared by Mr. Parton.
Yes, sir. And I'm presenting this for Mr. Genetti. He had some prior engagements, as y'all alluded to a little earlier. So we kind of put our notes together after the city council meeting. So at the last meeting of council, the council did have a discussion at the request of the audit committee to really look at whether there's some additional direction from the council on the additional roles and responsibilities above and beyond what the Audit Committee's been tackling. And so Mr. Jenney did present some initial comments that you guys had put together in our last meeting. City Council discussed those and then actually, I think, added a few more. So if y'all bear with me, I'll kind of walk through this list. What Mr. Janetti had asked me to ask you guys would be to really kind of deliberate these points, specifically to maybe try to put some definition behind these, and then to begin a discussion on how you'd like to prioritize these and how you'd really like to try to tackle some of these in what order. So, so the 7 things that were provided and discussed that request that the committee evaluate the Beaumont investment and financial policies. The item 2 would be to evaluate the security of our telecommunications systems. I think the concern there was, again, trying to maintain the integrity of our public records and also try to maintain the integrity of fraudulent or fraud activity that could occur out there. To develop a CFD training program for local realtors. And the point behind that was to try to do some sort of regular program where we can bring the realtors together, update them on what the CFD program is and some key points behind it. And the intent there is to make sure that our realtor community is as up to speed as possible with regard to the city's CFD program. Kind of along the same lines was also to develop an FAQ document that we would post on the city's website and make available to the community with regard to CFDs. So the item 5 was to assist with the preparation and execution of the RFP for the selection of our next independent financial audit services. We are in the 3rd of the initial 3-year term of the Poon Group, so you have an option whether to extend that contract out for 2 one-year extensions or to go out to RFP and try to do a full recruitment for those services. So you have some options there. To develop a financial training program for the general public. And so that's to create some sort of program intended for mass consumption that tries to help discuss the city's financial condition, the city's financial status, and financial processes, those types of things. And then, and ultimately, item 7, develop a process for reporting on grants. And so the discussion there was, what are the active grants that we currently have? What are some potential grant opportunities that we have? And then to provide a report, status report on where we are with either pursuing or executing on the grants that we have. So those are in no particular order of priority. Council didn't set any priorities to those, but they did state that that these were some general topics or general items that they would definitely like the Audit Committee to dive into and to work with them to develop. So with that, I turn it back to the committee for review and discussion.
Okay. Anybody want to open up the comments on these?
Yeah, I would.
Do we have public comments?
Public comments.
We do not.
Do it. All right.
I was a little surprised, but pleasantly surprised when I saw this because it happened so quickly. And oftentimes in government, things don't happen quickly, but this happened fairly quickly after we discussed it a couple months ago. So I was pleasantly surprised to see this come about. I do have some questions on, maybe it's the wording of these statements or something, but in terms of our roles and responsibilities as a Finance Audit Committee. For instance, assist with the request for a proposal RFP process for independent financial audits. Or assist in what way? I mean, that's kind of nebulous. And I don't know, maybe it was meant to be that way so that we would come up with
Yeah, I think
some assistance ideas, but
this is for talking points to give some direction as to what we think that we can input, where we might have some some understanding that may be of some value. And so that's what we're doing at this point in time is kind of talking about this and what we feel comfortable, or what each individual member feels comfortable with, what they think that they can bring to the city and to the process.
Well, I think in the past, I don't think in the past, we as a committee have ever looked at any kind of RFPs. That's pretty much generated by staff, and it goes through, the council and, the normal process. So my question is, when you talk about assist with the request for proposal, does that mean we get a draft copy of an RFP to look at, and if we do get a draft copy of an RFP to look at, can we change, or can we add things to it, or do we recommend adding things to it or subtracting? See, I'm not real clear on how that's going to work from this committee standpoint, is what I'm talking about.
I don't know that I can totally answer that particular question, but in the past, there has been staff and financial and audit committee members who have met to develop an RFP. So I think my impression, you go ahead and add to this if you've got a different one. My impression was that they wanted to, instead of having that process, they wanted to then bring the RFP for review by the Finance and Audit Committee before it was released, so that we can make sure as the committee that there's not something else that we want to add to the wording, and that we want to make sure that the RFP is exactly what should be done going forward, so that we get a good broad response on it. But the city manager or the mayor may want to add to that particular detail.
Well, then my second question is, in terms of setting a precedence, this is for an audit, but RFPs go out for a lot of other things that the city does. Somebody can make the argument that if you do it for one, you should do it for all. I'm not making that argument, but
Yeah.
I'm saying, somebody could make that argument.
Well, I think at this point in time, that has been limited, or not limited, but the only RFP that's being discussed now is an RFP process for the independent financial audit. And so that's the piece. And if you think the others may be appropriate, maybe that needs to be brought up for potential new business.
We're looking at our committee getting involved in some of these things. And if you're looking at our committee getting involved in some of these things, and you want us to get involved with this RFP, I'm saying the argument could be made that we should be looking at all the RFPs. And I don't think that's our responsibility.
I don't think that's what's being said here at all. This is the Audit and Finance Committee. This is the audit
Yeah.
RFP.
I mean, if there's an RFP for buying slurry seal for the city crew, I don't think that we have much expertise to add to, as long as they're following good standard RFP process, which we believe has been done since we've been in existence as a committee. But this particular one, yes, definitely should come before this committee, I believe.
So instead of assist, it should be just review. Basically, we would be reviewing
Well, I think we need to see
a
what,
draft copy, or,
I think we need to see what the city manager and the new finance director, if we're able to bring one on, and ask them, what do you want? Would you like some input up front? Would you like us to look at a draft copy? I think this is intended to be broad, to where we can define a process and figure out what works best for those people who are charged with getting that job done. And if we can assist, great.
Can I add one detail?
Of course.
And I think you bring up a very legitimate point, and that is that aside from this particular one, if you think that we as a committee should have the RFP process for all RFPs brought before the committee so that, because that's really policies and procedures also. So, and we're chartered with making sure that those are updated and in compliance. So you bring up a valid point. Aside from this particular application, if you feel that the process should come before the committee to make sure that they're all being done properly, then by all means in the future, you should bring that up as potential future business. Because I think it's a very good point, to make sure that it's being done properly.
Or maybe just a more detailed clarification when you put, like, evaluate the city of Beaumont investment and financial policies, just a little bit more detailed as to what exactly you want us to be looking at versus the broader scope. Here I am thinking, oh, you know, do I think you're making great investments? You know, just more clarification as to what financial policies you want us to maybe take an extra look at, if you guys are doing everything how it should be.
I don't want it, but there are strict guidelines
Yeah.
to what cities can do
Right.
for investments.
I think,
And they have to comply, and
But this just
you
says
certainly
evaluate.
know this,
yeah,
but
I think Mr. Genetti was the person who brought this up. And part of the issue is that the city hasn't had money to do any investment with, and it's starting to be a little bit of that. And part of what I'm sure Mr. Giannetti was considering at that point in time is that we need to look at what the policies are. Are those policies appropriate? Are those policies what, you know, the basic groundwork that we have to begin with is what does the state require? What does the state allow? And are we, number one, following those? Number two, is there somewhere we can expand on that? And I think part of that's going to be digging in and looking at those rules, those regulations to make sure that, number one, they're being followed. And then from there, what, if any,
you okay with that?
variances are there?
Written in the audit. Anybody ever read the audit?
I got a comment when you share. So
Sure.
I just think that the council's intention is to keep it as broad as possible so that we can use our expertise here to see what is it that we can offer to the council. And that's why it says here, once we have a plan to implement the elements. So if we can decide, you know, what is it, maybe we have to review what the RFP procedure is and how, you know, what input's needed. And then we can decide as a committee, okay, well, here's what we can offer for input, whether it be in the upfront, you know, how to set it up, and then come back and add to the choice, you know, the evaluation process.
Yeah,
you know.
I agree. I think that's, if you're looking at process, I think that's good. I would not want to look at, what you currently are investing in. I wouldn't want to look at that. I want to look at the process, and then I want to mirror that against what the state, federal, and whatever guidelines we're obligated to, make sure that that process falls within line with those obligations we have under the law, so that we're strictly in compliance with the law. That would be what I would seek to accomplish if we're going to go this route.
Right, and I think that's what the intention was. You know, we can't go in and redefine the city or the state code, but you know, auditors only look at a certain amount. And when we do an RFP, there's some things that just have to be done. There's other things that can be done, but the cost increases exponentially. And so that's part of it. It's let's make sure that we're looking at those items where we can bring something to the table that the city staff may not have the expertise and or the time, and that we really don't want to spend the money or shouldn't be, if we're being fiscally conservative, we shouldn't be spending the money if we have some other resources. And I think that's the attitude. We're talking about evaluating, not implementing. And
Right, okay.
I think that's the key word.
Process is good.
Yeah.
We need to do that. We've been doing that with other.
With other
areas of the
items, yeah.
business of the city. Okay. This CFD stuff, I tell you, you know, I did read the report, the overall county assessment evaluation of the CFDs in the county and the various entities that operate under CFDs. And it seemed to be, there is a problem with realtors. I mean, when they're selling properties, they have to disclose everything. I mean, you know, that's just part of being a realtor. And to be honest with you, you know, I bought into Tournament Hills. I was aware that it was told to me as a mellow ruse. Oh, this is like a mellow ruse. You know, they're paying for your schools and blah, 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 blah. That's how it was explained to me. So, you know, I was aware of the tax. I wasn't aware of a lot of the intricacies of it at the time. So maybe, I don't know, do we need to train realtors, or do we need to give them kind of a very simplified, easy to present to potential customers outline of something that would explain it?
One of the points is that I don't think that we can figure that out tonight in an informal conversation. This is a review of what council has said they would like to see us do more work on. So when you, not tonight, we're not going to figure out all the answers to what we need to do what the council has asked us to do on item 3 and item 4. But that's going to have to be the focus of one of our meetings, is what can we do for item 3. So I don't think we're going to be able to answer tonight what we should do to develop a process for grant reporting or to evaluate the city of Beaumont. We're not going to be able to do it tonight. What we're doing is understanding what the list is. We're going to have to figure out what the priorities are for us to address in order on this list, and then to segment out for a meeting whatever we prioritize as the first couple of them, and then begin to, you know, how do you eat an elephant, a bite at a time? So then we're going to have to take like item 3 as the first priority, if that's what everybody agrees to do and thinks support what council wants us to do, and then dive deep into item 3 and figure, it was purposely a bit vague so that we would work together and figure out what we need to do for item 3. So I don't think one of us is going to know the answer to that.
I think what I'd like to do, and I think what the concept here is here's a list. Go home, think about these, and look into it to what you think is important, what you think that you as an individual can bring to this, and then we come back at the next meeting and open it up and talk about those. As we look through here now, I've done a ton of financial training in the public sector, a lot of it. I've taught in universities, taught in colleges. I've taught tons of classes to consumer groups. So yeah, I have a little window there. And I think you all in that same boat have some things that may be of value to. Let's come back to the next meeting and then talk about, okay, which of these can we handle easily? Which of these are we ready to do something? And decide, prioritize them, which ones, and then move at future meetings as we go down the road. So let's say we prioritize them 1 through 7 at the next meeting, and the meeting after that, and, you know, it's going to depend upon what's in there, and we'll work on priority 1 and 2, and then get those in place, and then work on priority 3 and 4. I think that's where we're at. Yes?
I honestly feel like number 3 is not part of the scope of this committee. I think the developers should be training their realtors and explaining to them what the CFD is. I just think it's outside of the scope of what this committee was formed for. To develop a training for realtors, I mean, that's something they should automatically be informed. They're the ones with the selling the houses.
I agree with you as to who should be doing it, but I also think that the city has to deal with the citizens who come back and say, my realtor never told me that. My realtor never told me that. And I think if we're putting that information out, and then when we start getting these kinds of complaints and issues, then we have something we can go back to and say, well, we know that your realtor was given that information. That's the problem that I see happening, is that there's so much misinformation's out there, whether it's intentional by a realtor who's trying to sell a house, whether it's misinterpretation of how the realtor presented it. I don't know, and this is something we're going to have to look at. Is there something in the state licensing law that requires the realtors understand that? Or a salesperson, period. A realtor is a specific membership organization, but is there some state requirement that says they need to know that? Is it out there? Yes, ideally, the supervisor, be it a broker over some salespeople, or be it the Department of Real Estate, the state regulatory entity. For whatever reason, it's falling apart, because whenever I've seen a couple of question and answers that Todd's gone to, and people are asking questions, it's like, whoa, where's that question come from? That's so far out from where it's at. I think that we as a city and our committee has a responsibility to see that our citizenship, our citizens are getting accurate information, and I think one of the ways to do that is to offer it to the salespeople so that they have the information out there that if they choose to avail themselves of it, they can be accurate in their presentations.
And I'll tell you that the city council, when they discussed that specific point, was not necessarily that we're conducting full-blown training. It was that we hold like an annual event where we invite the realtor community in, and we explain where we are and give them an overview of the CFD program. And so that way they've got good information available to them. And what likely timing for that would be after the assessments are set, as you're getting into probably that October, November timeframe, when we've got assessments set, we know what the obligations of the CFDs are, and then from there we can walk the realtors through that. So hopefully after the first time or two, it's really more of an update to the realtor, to the real estate community. So it's not that we're going to tell them or try to explain to them what a CFD program is and how it works. It is, here's where the program is today, here's where this applies to our different subdivisions.
And it could be, if I can just address this too, that what gets provided from us or from whatever we develop is a list of, look, if you buy in this area, as I recall, one of the issues was that, people went in to talk to a director of finance at one of these places that was selling the homes, and that person had never heard of what a CFD is. At a bare minimum, maybe we can at least provide, look, if you're buying here in this property, this is what you're looking at in terms of your liability, so that whoever's selling can then apply that and say, in addition to your mortgage being this, your taxes, your fees based on this CFD are also going to be this. Because if somebody's going in and they make the purchase and they don't know that that's going to be added on at the end, that can make for a really nasty surprise. So it may be, and I'm totally speculating here, thinking out ahead, that maybe one of the things that we'd be able to help provide or have, our finance department put together is some sort of schedule that can provide that information to these people. But that's my speculation on it as a possibility.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Anna. I don't know if I think the city, the council, You're moving in the right direction. I don't know why we have to be involved in terms of trying to come up with a training program.
Well, we're not developing the program. Remember, this is a citizen committee that's supposed to give insight to the council. So if you say, hey, when you guys develop the program, here's some things that you really should make sure that's in there, because you're not only a citizen, a resident, but you're also our expertise on finance. So you got those two perspectives that you can give us direction. We're not asking for you guys to develop it. So it says develop, but really it's input more
Or
on the
input,
development, I think.
Once again, yeah.
I saw on the county, Riverside County tax collector, they had a great explanation on CFDs, and I really like their format. I know, one of the items is to kind of do a website, but they had like a really good format as to the explanation. I mean, it didn't break it down by section, but it gave a good explanation as to what it was. That's actually how I found out that I even had a CFD, because I myself, my real estate agent never told me when I bought my house. And they told me the same thing. It was Melrose. And I'm like, what are Melrose? I didn't even know that. So then I had to,
And see,
educate myself.
that's what we're looking for. You've seen that, and bring that. Bring back to that. If it's something that we need to get the permission from Riverside County to use, yeah, let's follow it through and do that,
Yeah, they
and
have
then
a
we
really
can we can hand it over to whoever actually puts it together, and say, here's the information that we found. These are the issues that we see may be out there. The bottom line is, you probably signed a stack of documents like this when you purchased your property, and I don't care who it is, 1 in 1,000 maybe reads all of that, if that many, and it comes back down the road. I never signed that, and if it's sticky enough and there's enough of an argument out there, someone goes out and hands them the sheet, and it's like deer in the headlights. I didn't realize that. And if we can help with some of those that have become issues, when people are, well, what are you saying? I'm paying this high a tax for that. I didn't know I was doing that. Why are you creating these new taxes? But they were there when they bought the property. If we can kind of steer off those things and make it so that the information is out there to where it can be easily found, and that helps.
Any information that is to the 10th, 11th grade level of understanding is important to get out to the community. No doubt about it. That's.
But I agree with a point you brought up, Anna. It's not our responsibility, and actually this almost relates to what you were saying about the RFPs, Mr. Beneke. It's not the responsibility of the Finance and Audit Committee to train the employees of some company that happens to be doing business in the city. Because even if we trained them today, and if their employee left, and another employee was hired, that company is not going to notify us that we need to go retrain that new person. So to get to that extreme is not reasonable, to put it nicely. So we can't do that. However, so it's not the city's responsibility to go train the people that sell real estate in this community. That is not the city's responsibility. However, it's the city's responsibility to do everything that they can to make sure that the citizens get as much information that they can in a way that they understand. And if that means that we need to do something more and something better, something more structured, something more proactive on CFDs, Melrose, whatever you want to term it, by all means. I bought a house that is in the CFD area. When we looked at the house, my husband didn't have a clue about what CFDs or Melrose was. And I said to him, you have to be careful because this property has Melrose on it. Because initially when I heard about that particular program, I heard it as Melrose. And then in the city we commonly call it CFDs because of the way that Beaumont has been structured, that's become the common term. But, and he didn't fully understand it. And the Realtor, the first time we looked at the house, did not say, oh, by the way, this house has CFDs or Mello-Roos on it. I'm not sure that when we get to that point, that that can ever be enforceable by this committee. However, we can strive and we can put it on the agenda to do the best job that we can of coming up with some sort of standard on information that we try to ask these property sellers that they adhere to the best level of information that we can encourage so that people are informed.
So I think that makes sense to everybody. I think that what we do, and we don't really need any kind of a motion or an action or anything, except maybe to put it as a future agenda item. But what I'd like to do is mull over this and think about this, and next meeting when we come back, let's talk about which ones we think that we have the capacity and the ability to do in a priority, and let's try to come up with two of them.
When we get down to
that we can go
future
down.
agenda
So, yeah.
items, I'd like to ask for this list to be put as a future agenda item at that point that we can prioritize so that we're not dragging our feet at all in terms of not being as proactive on the list as we should be.
Can we add something to this list? Or is this, no?
You can ask that it be brought back to council to add something to the list, but it's really council developed the list, so we can't
Okay.
add to it.
I would
But
like,
you-
I would
you
like,
can-
I'd like to ask the council, if the committee agrees, that one of the items on this list be that we, as a Audit and Finance Committee, get regular reports on bond money and how it's being spent, with the initial, the reason behind it, to build a fire station, to add more police, yada, yada. And where we're at on those kinds of initiatives to support those kinds of activities within that. I think that is more important to this committee, that we have that information. I've been on this committee since its inception. I've seen CFD reports, dollar amounts, everything, and I know it was such a mess. And God bless all you who've been working, putting it all pieces together, because it was such a mess. But I think we're at a point now where we might get some clarity, we might be able to see where this money was supposed to go, has it gone there, how much is left? I think that is very important information that I would like to see as a
I
committee.
think it might be appropriate if you're looking for that to go to the council and
Right.
ask for that. My concern is we can bury our time when we've got dozens, I don't know how many CFDs we have, but if we're looking at those on a basis every month, I'm
No,
not
no,
sure we
no,
can
not
accomplish
monthly,
anything.
maybe twice a year, semi-annually, something like that, just kind of an overview.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure. Let's
We
listen to your
have our
suggestions.
mayor on the Finance and Audit Committee, and he helps set the agenda with the city manager. So we don't have the ability as a committee
Right.
that's given direction by council to add something to it. But I don't want to speak for the mayor, but
No, no,
he can certainly bring it up to the city manager as a way to get it before council.
Well, if you
for
agree
discussion.
that's something important, I don't want to waste
I
everybody's time.
agree, it's very important. So I think what we'll do is I'll talk it over with Mr. Parton as far as how our intention is to report to council anyway, these items you're talking about, and then incorporate the Finance and Audit Committee before that. So we can do like we usually do, have a review before it comes to council, and we'll talk about that. So I agree.
Okay, and then I would agree that we, Councilwoman Carol, yeah, I know your name. Suggestion that we, that we take what's here, and then if something is added, we'll get it as a revised list. But I think we ought to, some of these things are going to take a lot of time.
Yes.
So there is your prioritization. I think as a committee, we need to figure out What do we want to look at first? We may spend a whole meeting on one or two of these
Right.
items.
And
So let's,
Just
let's
to-
mull that over in the next month
Just to quick clarify, anyway, that really wouldn't be a part of the list anyway, it'd be a report. So I don't think it needs to be added to that anyway. It'd be a report that would come to finance before it came to council. So we
Okay.
can make it easier that way so we don't have to.
okay?
And so from that perspective, maybe we can approach that at the end of the meeting with future agenda items, saying, let's discuss the possibility of adding this report so that we can review this regularly and make sure that that's being done in line.
And if we do have those reports, then we could put them out there for the public in a link for the website on CFD so that they know where the money's going.
And that's something
And
that
it's
we can
more
discuss
clarity.
as well.
Comment on that? Okay.
We'll
Okay.
work on that.
All right, so I think we've covered that. Anybody have anything else on that? Okay, so the next thing that's on the agenda is the meeting review, the treasurer's report. And of course, we have no
It's going to be
treasurer,
brief tonight. It'll
so,
be very brief.
yeah. So is there anybody that's going to be doing that? Todd, anybody even address that, is who's going to do the treasurer's monthly report to the council?
If it's okay, I'd be happy to address that to city council.
Is that
It's,
acceptable?
Yeah, he can even incorporate it in his manager.
Yeah, you can take your 4 sentences. Okay, so then at that point in time, it's been suggested that we need to set a future agenda items, and one of which is this list, and a gross overview as to where we want to go with it and prioritize it. Everybody agree to that? Anybody who doesn't agree to that? If nobody's disagreeing, then
Do you want to do it now? I mean,
that's it.
It's
We
not
don't
an
have any
action
other,
item for tonight.
yeah, it's not an item for tonight.
Not an action item for tonight.
Yeah,
So I'm not,
so it'd be something
Sure,
that would
if
go
we
on the
can.
future agenda. Is it,
can we do that if it's not an action item?
well,
that was higher
Can we
up.
prioritize?
I
that?
think we
Under
actually.
future
It's not an
agenda.
action item.
No, it's not an action
we
item.
can-
Future agenda.
Yeah,
Can we
do
add
that.
it to the future agenda?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to propose a couple items for the next agenda from this list to
Okay.
be discussed. Is that possible? Should be.
Yeah, there's no problem with that, is there?
Are you okay with that? You're all right with that, right?
Yeah.
I would like to request 1 and 5.
So you want us to, okay. So what I'm thinking is that what we do is in the future, what
I'm
we're going to
sorry,
put
what
on the
did you-
agenda is to,
Mr. Beneke, what did you?
I'd like to, for our next meeting, that we look at
Item 1 and 5.
1 and 5, the process for the investment finance policies, the process.
We have to prioritize first.
Yeah, we have to
before we do that.
prioritize.
Yeah,
Who's doing that?
I don't know
Yeah,
that
but
we
we
can do
haven't-
that at this point in time. I think
I'm
we
sorry.
need
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
The council.
consider.
The council prioritize?
No, the committee. See,
Committee.
I think our intention is next week meeting, we come with our prioritizes, 1 priority
Oh,
over
right,
5, or
yeah.
3
Right.
over 4. And then once
Oh,
it gets
How we
priority,
do it now?
then we'll, well, I was gonna ask that, if you wanted to prioritize.
I think we need to look at these
We-
and.
Could you rank like we do in council on the board? Could you do that?
Well, we can rank.
Yeah, yeah, because I already know what I.
That's what I was,
Okay.
I looked
But I
at-
mean, that way
studied
everybody
it.
can weigh in and whatever gets the most points. We've done this in council before.
Yes.
It
mean-
works kind of well when we all have to agree on like what's the highest priority.
so let me clarify, so, may I, Chairman?
Sure.
So instead of prioritizing next week, we're prioritizing now.
Yeah.
So we can put a,
Next week,
Okay.
we can put an agenda item there, if we get going on
I
it.
like that.
Much
Okay.
better.
Because I don't really want to drag this out.
No.
Right.
It is an action item anyway, so it's,
So what we've done in council when we have to do something like this and rank it, is we just list the 7, and then we say like, we put tick marks next to each one for the priority, and then we just count up the tick marks, and that gives you priority 1. No? Does
Right.
that make it sense?
That works.
You've seen us do that, Richard.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that way everybody weighs in at the same time.
I sort of got on this committee that through that process.
Priority.
So are you telling us you don't like that process?
No, it's a process.
Okay.
One, he should.
So then, here's my thing, okay. I think just have a couple of short comments on each of these items. So if somebody has some strong thing before we number off on them, I think just a couple of really quick ones. So if you have some strong feeling on one of them and some reason why or why not, and just go with that.
Fine.
So like, I'm looking at number one, and what my mind is saying, that's gonna take a bunch of research. I'm not sure that I'd be ready to jump into number one right up front, but maybe you have a different opinion. And the same thing as we click through, some of them I think will take more research, more development, and others less. But if you wanna just jump in and vote, let's do it. What's your thoughts?
What I might suggest is if we start here, we just go around the table, and if you just tell me how you rank these, 1 through 7. And then I'll just write, and then when you tally it up, the low score is the higher priority, and on down the list.
Okay,
If you'd like to do it that way.
I think that works.
Well, part of the problem I have with ranking, part of the problem I have with just reviewing this, I don't know how thick these policies are. I mean, if it's like a 3-page policy, we could handle that pretty, I mean, not quickly, but we can understand and read it. But if it's a 30-page policy, that might take a whole meeting to do just one item.
Yeah, but really, if it's priority, shouldn't matter on
Yeah,
that.
it's important.
It should go by just importance.
Just
So
importance.
if you think it's really important, then that's it, matter, it's 1
Yeah,
page or
but-
100.
Yeah.
Because if we
Yeah,
get
it's-
into how long things take.
Yeah, I think that totally,
Because, yeah, but some of these are big and.
Okay,
yeah.
do you,
Mr. Beneke, have you ever read War and Peace?
Yeah.
yeah, I think that,
Took me to your,
that overcomes the concern I had. So we're ranking these as far as priority.
Yeah, and then implementation will come later, once you look at War and Peace. And
Yeah. So in this ranking, it might be we hit number 2, and when we get to number 2, we say, man, that's so deep, we've got to move it down just because of time constraints. So right now, let's just go around and prioritize 1 through 7 as to where we feel right now.
yeah, well, I would like to,
if,
He's
you
gonna
want me
go
to go first?
Go
or-
ahead.
In order.
Oh,
No, we're going in order.
all right,
Yeah.
as long as somebody's ready, let's go.
we can start in the middle too, if you want.
Let's go.
Because I'm ready.
I would like, see, I would probably lump 3 and 4 together on the CFD. Just do a deep dive into all that stuff.
What's priority 1 though? Let's go with priority 1. What's priority 1
For you.
from you, Mr. Beneke?
Oh, that'd probably be number 3.
Okay. Number 2 would be,
7.
okay. Number 3?
Well, 3 and 4 to me would be 1, number 1.
Okay, so 3 and 4 are both 1, okay. 7 is 2.
And then 5 would be 3 or 4, 3.
3, uh-huh.
And then what's left?
You've got 1, 2, and 6.
You, okay.
No,
Jackie, so what would 1, what would 2, and what would 6 be? How would you, so what's number 4?
no, my number 1 would have been,
Yeah, number 3 and number 4 are both tied for 1.
One.
Those are your top priorities. Your second priority is 7, 5 is your third, so it's your fourth priority.
4th priority would be, five, did I get 5? No, I
Not
got
5, yeah, number 3.
Okay, grant reporting?
Is that number 6?
Seven.
So,
Already got that.
yeah, 7's 2. So 3 and 4 are your first priority. 7 is your second priority.
Okay.
5 is your third priority.
Okay, the investment policies,
Okay, that'd be your
4.
Okay.
5 and number 2.
And this is number 6 for 6.
I'll switch these.
Okay. So I'm kind of like with him on 3 and 4, just lumping them both as one together.
All right, we're close.
Number 2, I would say I would do item number 5, which is the RFP.
Okay.
Number 3 would be the financial policies.
Which is going to be number 1?
Right.
Okay.
Number 4 would be the security of the telecommunication system.
Which is?
No,
Two.
item number 2.
Number 2, okay.
And then I would do the development of the process for grant reporting as my 5th item, number 7, and number 6 at the end.
6. Okay.
In order, 1, 3, 4, 5, 2, 7, 6.
Okay, and mine would be 5, 4, 6, 1, 3, 7, 2.
4, 7, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6.
6, 4, 2, 3, 1, 5, 7.
I'll have 2, 1, 3, 4, 4, and then 2.
See his math skills. Here we go.
So with this scenario, the lowest number wins?
Yes. Okay, so 3 and 4 tie as your, right, so 3 and 4, so that's the CFD training and CFD FAQ. So those tied as your first priority. And your second priority, very close, is item 5, which is the RFP process. There, so here's 1, number 2, and then we get to number 1, which is the financial policies. 3, then you get to item
Telecommunication
2.
system.
Yep. You get to 7, which is the grant reporting.
And then the
Your
trainings
6th
for
priority.
public.
Yep. So does that sound appropriate to you guys?
It does.
So 1, tied for 1 is the CFD training program and the FAQ, because those are linked. The second priority is the RFP for audit services. The third priority is to evaluate the investment and financial policies. The fourth one is to evaluate the telecommunications systems. The 5th one is the reporting for grants. And the 6th and final is the financial training for the general public.
Okay, everybody okay with that? Okay, so we put that on for future agenda in that order, is that correct? Is that what we're understanding?
Let's start with.
So that's the priorities that we've decided on tonight. Next meeting,
Will be CFP.
we'll have this having looked at it and decide if that's where we want to stay and go from there.
So you are putting CFDs in, correct? CFD is gonna be our priority next week,
Right.
next meeting.
Yeah. and-
Right.
If we need additional days, can we extend, like, not
Oh,
just,
yeah.
oh,
Yeah, this
you
is
know,
just
back to back?
priority. It's just not,
Okay.
it might take us 3 meetings to get through number 1,
Right.
you know.
Now, I have one question. When is the RFP due?
Good question.
So because we have a time
Yeah.
constraint there, we may have to,
It's January.
okay, so we have,
What I would recommend that y'all consider is if you want to select a volunteer to sit with staff, we can kind of roll through the RFP and make any kind of tweaks that the volunteer, maybe a couple volunteers would like. And then we can bring the RFP document to this committee for a final review and discussion. So give y'all a couple, 3 meetings to kind of first digest it, think about it, and then make any kind of additional tweaks you would like. And then we can get it launched.
so timeframe, when will your staff be working on it?
So we will be finishing up this audit, like I said, through December. So we really need to, if we're going to back out to RFP, we need to be ready to go out to RFP probably in February, March at the latest.
Okay,
The latest.
Yeah.
I think when we had some issues with people being able to respond in time, anything after February was considered too late. For a lot of companies had committed resources. So I think you're spot on.
okay.
with February.
So by next meeting, if we could determine the volunteers and we could get some feedback as to who may be willing to do that.
You bet.
Okay.
Bet you that'd be.
And that can be an agenda item for the next meeting.
Yes, can that be an agenda item for the next time? To determine, well, I guess, does it function as a subcommittee? Is that what we need to do in order to?
We can structure the agenda to have all 7 of these items on there
Mhm.
and just rolls forward, and then you guys can decide.
You know, that volunteer, does that have to be structured as a subcommittee, or can we just have a volunteer?
You can probably volunteer somebody to do it.
Okay,
I just-
Or appoint somebody, you
As
can
long as you don't
appoint
have
whoever
too
you want.
many, you know, if you have 1 or
Or-
2, I think.
all right,
Anybody
okay.
on the committee.
So then let's look at who's willing to do that and feels like they can add to the city staff.
I'd be willing to do it if you join me, Mr. Cooley.
Yeah, we'll talk about that next time, but I don't have a problem with that.
But I do want to bring up the point that Mr. Beneke brought up about something that he wanted to be considered, whether it could be added to the priorities. Because if council agrees and thinks that should be one of the list items, then we might want to consider again at a future meeting whether we insert that somewhere in the priorities, because it was a very valid point, I thought.
You're referring to the CFD reporting?
The RFP.
Well, I'm not saying it would necessarily go before anything, but maybe you want to move
The RFP
item
before.
6 to 7 and push it in at 5. I don't know. I
Let's-
don't
yeah.
want to make decisions for the
Yeah.
committee, but if council believes that it's something that should be done, we might want to reconsider whether we want to insert it someplace within those priorities.
I think
That's
that-
all.
I think-
I don't want it to be dropped off the list.
Yeah,
I think it's a good idea, yeah.
I think that's key. We serve to assist the city council. The city council thinks our priorities are not meeting their needs. Yeah, there's no problem with shuffling those around. You know, something could come up tomorrow that needs some immediate attention. And so, yes, I think that's always should always be our attitude, is that, you know, this is what we've looked at when we were given some opportunity to consider what we'd like to do. But if council has a need, we're going to respond to that need. Okay, so are we set? You know what we need for the future agenda items?
Yep.
All right, so then the next scheduled meeting will be Monday, October 7th at 6 p.m. And with that, we'll call this meeting to a close at 7:05 p.m.